So how big of a blunder am I talking about? I hope it's not too big. It's just that I got the weeks mixed up. We're supposed to be talking about housing policies this week, but I inadvertently prepared for housing finance or week 10. That should be okay. We can talk about policies. Next week. But maybe the biggest change to our classroom is, if you have not seen it already, is that I've added, starting from the week 10 session, I've added handouts. So I've added handouts here and handout submission. Now, does that mean that you have to access and complete the handouts and submit them? No, those handouts are optional. If you want to download them, if you want to complete them, you're more than welcome to do so, and you can use it to receive extra credit or extra grades if you like. I'm not saying that you have to. You can do it if you want. So starting from week 10, week 11, and 12, 13 even, we have handouts. I've prepared handouts and handout submissions. Now the handouts contain reading materials and multiple choice and open-ended questions. Again, it's an optional thing. You don't have to do it if you don't want to. If you feel that that's okay, the other evaluation or assessment components are enough, I'm pretty confident that I'll be receiving a decent grade, then that's fine. You don't have to do it. If you want to do it, you can do it. Now, the other announcement that I need to make is about the group assignment. Now, the group assignment here, I've added the terms of reference. Oh no, sorry. This shouldn't. Split with this. Okay. Now the terms of reference are as follows. Your task in this group assignment is to analyze housing needs, to identify institutional arrangements, and consider funding sources. Now, the assignment duration I set is for approximately 4 weeks, so from week 12, 13, 14 to 15. But I thought since this is going to be the first time we do this task, I am allowing you to have a head start. So you can start immediately if you want, but the timeline is only counted from week 12. Now, your tasks include determining housing needs and housing demands. So you need to identify and analyze current housing needs and current housing demands within a specific urban or regional context. So you choose the location. Say, for example, Kabupaten Jember Regency, or it doesn't have to be in Indonesia if you like. That's okay. It can be in international context, so in a different city, in a foreign land somewhere. But identify and analyze the current housing needs within your chosen location. How do you analyze current housing needs and housing demands? Well, you can use You can use quantitative approaches or qualitative data to derive the housing needs. You can look at population. You can look at population data, demographic data, and then you make a projection. So we have population data from the last 5 years, for example, and from this we can project over the course of the next, I don't know, 10 years or so. This place is going to, have or going to welcome more people, blah, blah, blah. And so we need this many houses. And then you propose strategies to address housing deficit. So you have to identify what's the current housing situation there. Is there a backlog or a housing deficit, or is there a surplus based on your analysis? And then the second task is to determine institutional arrangements. Institutional arrangements here means who are the stakeholders involved in housing development and housing provision in your locality, in your chosen area? Is it predominantly private developers? Is it predominantly government initiative? Is it predominantly public housing, maybe? So what's the current, sorry, not public housing. Is it predominantly public or private development? And so, and what is their relationship between the public sector and the private sector in housing supply and housing management? Who funds housing development there? And if you don't have a clue just yet, that's okay, because that's what we're going to talk about this week. You can then propose improvements or alternatives to enhance the housing supply efficiency and more importantly, its equity. Discuss the role of different stakeholders and institutions in housing provision. Third step or third task is to determine plausible funding solutions or plausible funding sources. Identify potential funding sources, bank loans, regional grants, or maybe bonds. Consider public, private, and hybrid financing models. Identify and analyze the advantages and disadvantages of each funding source. Each funding source comes with different characteristics. And then you can make recommendations on the most suitable funding sources for the given context. Now, for step number 3, there's a case study that I provided in classroom that I'm sure would be valuable or maybe useful for this particular step. Now, steps 4 and 5 are not exactly the steps per se, but it's just that if your report is clear, your written report is clear, it's well organized, that nabs you an extra 5 points, and creativity and innovation also nabs you an additional 5 points. Now, the written report should be within about anywhere between 8 to 10,000 words. I'm saying 8 to 10,000 words is because normally a journal article is about 8,000 words. My last article got rejected because it was 10,000, or almost got rejected. It was 10,000. They asked us to adhere to the limit of 9,000 words, so I had to eliminate 1,000 words from the article. So I think about 10,000 words would be more than sufficient. That should give you, it's a maximum of 10,000. So if you only want to do 1 word, then that's fine. But that's all the points that I'm going to give you, of course, according to that 1 word. Submission requirement. Another submission requirement is properly cited sources and references. If you don't know how to do that, I can give you some pointers, some tools to help you with citing sources and references. And then a statement of contribution from each group member. Now, this goes in line with the department's efforts of increasing individual assessment. So I need you to make within your report, within the 10,000 word limit, a statement of contribution from each of your members. So what did you do? How did you contribute to the group? And if you can quantify it, I contributed to 25% of the report. If you can do that, if you can quantify it. And then, of course, because at the end of the assignment, you would have to present your findings. Then it's a group presentation with visual aids or slides. So I'm asking you to submit two separate items: the written report and your presentation slides. So the assessment criteria reflects the tasks at hand, and yeah, I will assess your assignment based on the quality of the written report and group presentation. Now, I realize that there hasn't been a lot of evaluation in this class, so I'm going to close the terms of references for a bit now and go back to our classroom. The group assignment terms of reference is available under week 12. But as I said, why am I giving it to you now? Because I want you to have a head start, just in case you stumble into any trouble while compiling or while completing this assignment. And so the timeline starts at week 12. And by week 14, so from week 14, 15, and 16, we will focus on the group assignments only. So week 14, assignment progress stage 1, where you should at least have identified and analyzed the current housing needs. I'm sorry if that's too small to see. Hang on. Where you have identified, analyzed current housing needs, demands within your chosen area. You've applied relevant quantitative and/or qualitative data to assess the housing needs and housing demands. And then you propose strategies to address housing deficits and surpluses. And you've researched and evaluated existing institutional arrangements that are associated with housing supply and management. And then in week 15, you will present the stage 2 progress, where you should have completed tasks in stage 1, and you've proposed improvements or alternatives to enhance housing supply. You've discussed the roles of different stakeholders and institutions in housing provision, and you've identified the potential funding sources for housing provision, and you considering the public, private, and hybrid financing models. And then week 16, final group assignment or final presentation. All of the tasks in stage 1 and 2, plus you're going to analyze the advantages and disadvantages of each funding source, and you make recommendations for the most suitable funding sources for the given context. So the assignment is sort of like a studio assignment. It is sort of like producing or compiling a housing development strategy that is normally formulated by local governments. So I try to mimic that process with the assignment. Yeah. And so once again, you can start your assignments now, but we will only start to present each group's progress starting from week 14. Now, once again, for all of those who have just joined in, if you open the classroom and you find handouts and handout submissions, I need to remind you that the handouts are there if you want to earn extra credit. You don't have to do it. You can do it if you want to. And so it contains a reading material, some reading material, and a few multiple choice and open-ended questions. And once you completed that, you can submit through each respective folder. So week 10 is in week 10, week 11 in week 11, so on and so forth. Once again, it's an optional thing. You can just focus on if you want to focus just on the group assignments, then yes, by all means, you can do that. Now, because the group assignment alone, the stage one progress report, stage 2 progress report, and the final presentation, plus that the graded forum discussion that we had a few weeks back, already makes up the minimum 4 evaluation components for this class. And so again, if you want to add another component because you want to gain an individual advantage, then you're more than welcome to do so. All right. Any questions thus far regarding the assignment before I continue with yes? Haven't we determined the groups yet? No. Oh, okay. Yeah, it's up to you, really. I'm not going to get myself, involved in the group establishment process. Or unless you want me to randomize the group, it's up to you. If you're not comfortable with me randomizing your group, then you can choose your group mates. I'm not going to restrict you on that. Just if you decide to do it yourselves, then please please give me a copy of the group list by the end of the day, and I'll set it up in the classroom for you. How many of us are there? 15. Yeah, 15. So we can do 3 groups of 5 if you like. 3 groups of 5, or 5 groups of 3. That was a very, very quick, a very, very quick response. Okay, 3 groups of 5 it is. 3 groups of 5. Okay, any other questions with regards to the assignment? No? Or we can come back to that a little later then. Let's just go and explore what I have to share with you today. Oops. Oh, I didn't mean to stop. I meant to pause share, but anyways. And we're back. So again, I made a blunder. We should be talking about policies today, but instead we're talking about housing development financing. And I gave you an overview of how housing is provided, and who are involved in providing the housing and delivering the actual products. But in doing so, in delivering the products, then it only makes sense. It is only made possible to deliver those products, to deliver the houses, if there is adequate and efficient financing, if there are funds involved. I like what the Germans have to say about money. They say Geld ist nicht alles, aber ohne Geld geht alles nichts. Or money isn't everything, but nothing goes without money. And so today I'd like to give you an overview about the various funding options for housing and to secure housing. And I'll also talk about a case study that involves housing infrastructure funding strategies in East Java. It's because the case study is there because when it comes to funding for individuals, it's very straightforward and it's very easy. The slides are available in Classroom, by the way. You can also access them in your own time. The types of housing financing for individuals is pretty straightforward. In Indonesia, we have the home ownership loan or kredit pemilikan rumah, KPR. It's a type of housing finance that is commonly provided by banks. I think it's the most popular type of housing financing option. It's the most accessible. It's what people are most familiar with. And then in Indonesia, we have something called murabahah, is a type of financing used in the Islamic banking system that we use here. Bank Muamalat is one of the Islamic banks in Indonesia that has this scheme. The difference between murabahah and the home ownership loan is that it is a contract. The bank purchases the property and then resell it to you at a higher price. So they take they make profit off the higher price, of course. And it allows you to pay in installments. And the difference between the home ownership loan and this sort of transaction is that it doesn't involve interest. Or in the Arabic term for that, or the Islamic term for that is riba. It's something that should be avoided, so they say. But the bank still makes profit anyways. Another type of Islamic funding that is used not in Indonesia but in Malaysia is the Musyarakah Mutanakisah. It's quite a mouthful, that is. It's a partnership contract where they at the beginning they jointly, the customer and the bank jointly own the property, and then the ownership status gradually gets transferred to the customer. So the customer gradually buys out the bank's share. And so this again does not involve a degree of interest. It's just I think it's an interesting way of, it's an interesting way of trade. Co-ownership first, and then a transfer of ownership as time progresses. And the fourth option for individuals in Indonesia is the Home Financing Liquidity Facility, or Fasilitas Likuiditas Pembiayaan Perumahan, FLPP. It's a government it's a government initiative. It's a financing facility by the government of Indonesia, providing financial assistance to low-income individuals. So the difference between KPR and FLPP is that FLPP is aimed for low-income households and or individuals. Now, the program helps individuals who are unable to afford housing costs up front. So think about not even having enough money to pay for the down payment of a house, then FLPP helps you with the down payment. It helps you with the financing from down payment all the way to arranging the installments for you. But you still have to pay the installment fees, of course. And then finally, people's housing savings or tabungan perumahan rakyat (TAPERA), housing financing program targeted at low-income households and individuals. It's a savings program. So it's a savings program that allows individuals to save money for housing purposes. So the difference between FLPP and TAPERA is that you save up for a house first. So you open an account and you save up for a house. It's like opening an account for pilgrimage or for Hajj. It's very similar to that. But this one is for housing purposes. You can use the funds that you have saved up to either buy a house, so to finance the purchase, or you can finance the construction of a house. Can you buy land with it? Yes, you can buy land with it. You can buy land with TAPERA. You can buy land with FLPP. It's just it's just a financing scheme. It's quite flexible in how you go about doing it. Now, for non-individuals, that's where it gets complicated. And there's a lot of parties involved. There's a lot of different schemes involved. And there's a greater option. What I can say is for non-individuals, so for groups, for enterprises, for example, you have so many different things. And so this is why I want to bring you into the case study for today, financing basic infrastructure for housing development in East Java. The case study is available in the classroom as a document. So you have the full final report document available in the classroom. Unfortunately, the final document is available only in Indonesian. If you want the English version, there is a book. There is a book in the classroom. I'll show you a little later on. There is an English version that consists of a summarized version of the final report. I haven't finished summarizing it yet, so please bear with me. Despite all of the generative AI and the assistant tools that I have on hand at the moment, I still can't quite summarize the document as quickly as I wanted to. But here's the backdrop of this particular case. Now, we start off with the fact that the government, or any government, has a responsibility to provide basic services, to provide basic infrastructure, basic utilities, in public housing and settlements, and in cities or regions in general. And currently there is a high backlog of housing and a declining settlement environment in East Java province. Now, the backlog here is not the lack of housing, but the backlog here is due to there is a supply. There are a lot of empty houses out there, but people can't seem to access those houses. And so that's a sort of backlog. It's the home ownership backlog that we're talking about here. And affordability, availability, accessibility, and sustainability are the driving factors and the key factors that are related to housing financing issues. Now, this particular case does not does not talk about, in any case, about housing provision. It's purely about financing options and finding the ideal financing scheme. Now, it's stated down here in the aims and objectives that the purpose of the preparation of the East Java Settlement Basic Housing Infrastructure Financing Strategy. So my task, or my team's task, with Pak Frendika and some other colleagues, was to find or to formulate a strategy, the best strategy to finance basic housing infrastructure in East Java. And so we needed to identify the potential financing options that we can develop to support the provision and acceleration of the fulfillment of basic housing and settlement infrastructure. And to do that, we needed to analyze the demands and the supplies of financing options for the provision of basic infrastructure. So in the document, you will find the different financing options and the definition for each scheme. So that should help you with get along with your task. And second, we needed to analyze the characteristics of the potential financing for the provision of basic infrastructure. Now, I know the case study talks about basic infrastructure, but you can also apply this. You can also apply the financing schemes to housing provision and development in general, and analyze issues and problems in providing basic infrastructure for residential facilities in East Java, and then finally to formulate a strategy for potential financing schemes. However, although we have stated the aims as such, and although we have established 4 objectives as such, in practice, if you look at the report, it's not as straightforward as that. Some of the objectives were merged, and I think we also split the fourth objective, the strategy bit, into 2 different into 2 subsets of objectives or something or other. Okay, so let's push on. And now we start with analyzing the demand and the supply of financing schemes or financing options. Apparently, there is a supply budget and there's a demand budget. The supply budget is usually obtained from the budget ceiling of each financing program, or each program in several housing and settlement infrastructure types, usually found in the housing provision strategy document, or RKPD. And then there's also the national and the regional government budget schemes for as the primary financing sources for housing infrastructure. So those are the supply budgets. They're sort of given. And then there's the demand budget. Demand budget is derived from the budget assumptions with a target of 100%. So, for example, the supply budget is the given budget. How much money does the government have? For example, 100 billion. The demand budget takes into consideration how many houses is needed, how many units are needed, how much infrastructure is needed, and then that comes down to how much do they cost. Oh, it costs 150 billion, for example, but the government only has 100 billion. So there's a gap. Said here, there's a budget gap of 50 billion. Now, that is what you need to determine. Where are we going to get the extra 50 billion to fund housing and infrastructure? So once we have listed the potential funding sources, I'll give you an example here. We obtained the list of potential funding sources from documentary review, from various interviews that we conducted with relevant stakeholders, and we then cross-referenced it with the sort of infrastructure category or infrastructure that is needed to support housing development. Now, there are approximately nine infrastructure categories. So roads, water, storm drains, waste management, sewage, green open spaces, public facilities, housing units, and other public. Yeah, there are nine categories. And then from the list of potential funding sources, we try to map which source would be more suitable for which infrastructure. So the regional and the national and the regional budgets, there are cooperative schemes, regional grants. Sorry, these are not loans. Regional grants, corporate social responsibility, asset management schemes, perhaps, international loans, joint ventures, and so on and so forth. Oh, actually, KPBU kok muncul 2 kali di sini. Development impact fees, and does anybody know what hibah is in English? I was thinking of grants, but I'm not sure if grant is the right word for hibah. Let's go with grant. Let's go with grant. And so here, yeah, from the various funding schemes mapped out, which would be ideal. Again, this is a result of documentary review and interviews with potential or with key stakeholders. And then once we did that, and we do realize, you do realize that each financing scheme has their unique characteristics. They have their own strengths and weaknesses. And so we then scored, we analyzed by scoring which of those, to determine each scheme's suitability for the particular infrastructure that we needed. And so this scoring analysis also allowed the identification of issues and problems in the provision of basic infrastructure. So it goes both ways. It's not just, it didn't just allow us to map or to identify which one is the most ideal, but it also allowed us to identify specific issues, specific problems in financing infrastructure provision. Now, the scheme was scored against 7 criteria. So regulation availability, is there legal framework to support that scheme? Implementation history, as in, has it been done before? What is the success rate? Has it been successful? Where has it been implemented? And not far off from the implementation history, the associated risks. If it failed, what made it fail? Are there any risks associated with that scheme? What are the potential benefits and how sustainable is the scheme? Are there any social or economic benefits? Are there any financial benefits? And how much? And then finally, how much can this scheme leverage development in or within the area? So you can find out more about the scoring mechanism and how it was carried out through the report that is available in the classroom. Now, we found 4 levels, or 4 levels or 4 categories of ranking in the schemes. Regional grants, bonds here. What we mean by bonds or bearer bonds here are like surat berharga. What's that in English here? Bonds, surat berharga, like obligations, that sort of thing. Sukuk retail, obligasi, that sort of thing. That's bonds. And PPP, public-private partnerships. So that's the highest. Those are the schemes that have the highest total score, which means they are the most likely to be implemented and they are the most feasible to be implemented. In second place, highest total score. This is a big one. DBHJHT. Does anybody know what that is? It has something to do with tobacco. In Indonesian, DBHJHT is dana bantuan hibah dari cukai hasil tembakau. It's a mouthful, I know. So it's funds that are derived from the income that is gathered from tobacco tax. And then village funds, revolving funds, PHLN, pinjaman, hibah luar negeri, so foreign investment, foreign loans. And then there's the local or government-owned corporations, and then another foreign investment. Sorry, PHLN is the foreign loans and grants. PINA is the foreign loans and investments. Third place, development exactions, joint venture, and I forgot what KSDP is. But I think it has something to do with regional cooperation. And then other schemes that can be utilized are the management of regional funds, special allocation funds, DAK, dana alokasi khusus, special allocation funds, regional grants, asset management. There are some betterment levies. We even found that religious, I call them religious tax, zakat, badan amil zakat nasional. So we can even use religious tax to fund a degree of infrastructure development. And then the workforce insurance and corporate social responsibility. Now, there is another financing scheme called philanthropy, where, well, philanthropy, I think, speaks for itself, where private parties would donate a certain amount of money or anything else in kind in providing infrastructure. However, existing regulations that support or allow philanthropy or philanthropic efforts is still very scarce, inadequate, and so the legal framework is not really that strong to support that. Self-help financing schemes are not suitable in the context of infrastructure provision. Housing provision is fine. Self-help financing schemes can help you with housing, but not when it comes to infrastructure. Home scale infrastructure is fine, but settlement scale it's not feasible. But anyways, financing schemes that fall out of the four categories mentioned above is usually not feasible due to regulatory framework availability or regulatory framework support. Now, then we needed to map the different infrastructure funding according to the infrastructure service scale of service and the potential funding amount. So the service scale, we divided the service scale into two major categories for single and multiple dwelling units. So housing scale at a very local scale. So anything that can be achieved by a household or multiple households is considered the single and multiple dwelling unit scale. And then we have the settlement scale. So regional scale infrastructure, regional scale public facilities. So once it involves multiple settlements, then that's beyond the housing, beyond the single and multiple dwelling unit scale. The infrastructure such as housing units that can be self-help, that can be self-provided, sanitation infrastructure, basic sanitation infrastructure such as the water treatment plants. I know individual houses here have individual water treatment plant facilities. Septic tank, that's the best example of it. Small bridges and other small scale infrastructure and utilities. Regional scale infrastructure, so access ways to the settlement, motorways, clean water, electricity, gas are not something that you can generally provide for yourselves and provide for your local community. And then you have the regional scale public facilities, transport hubs, so terminals, airports, train stations, healthcare facilities and education facilities, etc. So once we created those two categories, then we mapped the different levels for the different sources of funding accordingly. So home scale and multiple dwelling scale, and then the settlement scale. And out of the many different funding schemes, it's the regional bonds or the regional obligations that can actually cross between the two categories. Other than that, they're all pretty set apart. So once we've mapped that through, and then we seek out recommendations for other non-governmental funding schemes. And there are 15 non-governmental funding schemes that we identify, and then we rank them accordingly to the different scales of settlement: single, multiple dwelling unit, and settlement scale. Like so. And then finally, we came up with recommendations to optimize these non-governmental funding schemes. Now, why did our focus suddenly shift from considering both governmental and non-governmental funding schemes to suddenly channel our attention to non-governmental funding schemes only? Well, it's because, first of all, our client was the East Java provincial government. So they already know how much money they have. They already know the sort of governmental fundings they can access, but they were still sort of clueless in what sort of non-governmental funding schemes they can use, what's available out there. And so we identified these 15 non-governmental funding schemes for them and ranked them accordingly. Now, once we've identified them, we need again to consider the characteristics of each funding source, and then find a way to optimize those schemes. Now, the recommendations sort of reflect the 7 points or the 7 criteria that we use to score the different funding schemes. The codes above, OD, KSD, BK, and so on, they refer to the, sorry, shouldn't do that. They refer to the to these 15 schemes. So you may notice that there's the recommendations include to provide and to renew existing regulations, and to prepare strategies to reduce and to even alleviate any sort of funding risks, and to prepare strategies to increase the likelihood of funding sustainability, to strategies to optimize the socio-economic benefits, strategies to increase the financial benefits, and the proliferation or the proliferation of developmental levies or developmental leverage. And as you can see, not all schemes receive the same treatment. There are some that overlap. Some only receive one recommendation. OD, for example, just need to reduce the risks. Other than that, they may receive 3 or 4, 2, 3, 4 or more recommendations. And then at the settlement scale, things are a little bit different. At the settlement scale, it's not the regulations that need to be, it's not the regulations that we need to pay attention to, but it's more to reducing and alleviating the risks associated with the different types of funding, and finally to increase the leverage or the scope of the current funding scheme. And is there? I think that's pretty much it for what I can share with you today. So again, there are several schemes that are available for individuals to access housing. And for large-scale housing development, there are even more funding schemes available. 15 non-governmental, and if you add the governmental funding schemes to that, then you can easily end up with a handful of different funding schemes. So, and then we discussed that, we discussed the case study. I'm going to show you where the case study is. This is a copy of the case study report. Again, unfortunately, it's written in Indonesian. It's not a particularly large or particularly thick report. There's a lot of I think there's a lot of things that you can extract. There's a lot of information that you can extract from this report. What I find most interesting when I helped compile this report is the scoring analysis or the scoring scheme. So yeah, you can have a look at that and perhaps incorporate that as well into your group task, into your group assignment, you know. And this is the book that I was talking about. This is the summarized version, the English version of the case study. It looks something like this. You can navigate through summary. This is the introduction. And each chapter, it doesn't have all the chapters of the report right now. Just I tried to highlight the key information available in the report. But again, even with the array of generative AI tools that I have on my hand, I've only managed to summarize until I think the demand and supply, blah blah blah. I haven't really gotten that far into the report. So this sort of analysis is available. Blah blah blah. Yeah, I haven't gone all the way through to the conclusion just yet. But I'm sure it'll help. It should help some of us to at least understand the context of the case study report that I'm sharing with you. And that's it for financing options and funding. It was actually quicker than I thought. Any questions? And that's it for this week. Okay, any questions on housing finance? Alista, you might have a question. Maybe if you do, you're more than welcome to type a question into the chat. Other than that, so I think next week, rather than go to slum settlements, the lawsuits, and then construction. Okay. So while I wait for any remarks, you can start marking your attendance. By the way, we have a visiting professor this week for the Cities International Conference. He should be giving a guest lecture now, and there is another guest lecture at 1:30. So if you're not doing anything at 1:30, you can come and you're more than welcome to attend this guest lecture. It's aimed at the master students, but don't let that deter you from attending. Don't let that deter you from attending the lecture. If you're interested, then you're more than welcome to join in. And then tomorrow, when we have cities, I think tomorrow and Thursday, there shouldn't be any classes. Yes, there's a letter that has been circulated, so there shouldn't be any classes tomorrow and the day after. Please do come. Please do attend cities at Doubletree at Tunjungan. Even if you're not there for the conference, you're only there for the lunch and tea breaks. Yeah. Okay. Huh? Yes, you can. Oh, you have to pay. That's right. You have to pay as a participant. That's right. There's no such thing as a free lunch. I think for the price you pay, you should. I mean, you know, the hotel's catering is pretty good, so you should get a decent lunch. Okay, so if there are no questions, are there any questions with regards to the tasks, to the assignment? Case study, case studies. All right, so no tasks. Yes. Yeah. To overlap, yes. Create problems, not likely. The different types of funding. So if we come back to, for example, if we come back to, is it this one? Yeah, if we come back to this, for example. Where the road networks is funded by the national budget, the regional budget, or other schemes. A lot of the times, the national budget alone cannot cover for a particular infrastructure. It has to be supported by other schemes. It could be from an international loan, it could be from an international grant, or from other forms of investment. It could be from private parties. So a lot of the times these funding sources do not operate on their own. They complement each other. But what can you do to ensure that they don't cause, the only problem they cause is usually administrative issues, administrative problems. So the key to ensuring that the different types of funding do not, or the different types of funding can be used optimally, is to make sure that there is a clear division of labor, well, quote unquote labor. So the national budget will only cover up to a certain percentage, and then the rest would be from joint ventures or from corporate social responsibility, for example. Because none of these, if you're talking about infrastructure provision for housing or infrastructure provision in general, none of these funding sources are adequate individually. You have to complement them with something else. So I think that's the only way I could sort of simplify it for you. So once again, no such thing as a standalone source of funding. Even the biggest private developers, they usually have their own funds, and then funds from a consortia, and then funds from elsewhere. And for infrastructure provision, a lot of private developers also use or leverage infrastructure subsidies that the government has. And so what these infrastructure subsidies basically do is that okay, the government will pay either through their budget, or from other schemes, from other governmental schemes. Maybe 30% of the infrastructure provision. The rest, well, it's up to the private developer and their consortium. So yeah, I think that's the only way that these different funding options can operate. Is that clear? Or any other remarks? Money, give it to me. Pardon? Oh, don't we all? It was so hot last night that I couldn't sleep either. I had my air conditioning at 16 and I'm still sweating. It was that hot. Okay. I think it's a good idea if I can provide a glossary of terms for this slide. Make a mental note of that. So, alrighty then. Any questions outside of class hours? Please direct them to the discussion forum. And thank you everyone for coming in today. Again, I remind you of the guest lectures that we're going to have, and if you can attend cities tomorrow, please do attend. Not for the coffee break and lunch, of course, but for the educational purpose and values, obviously. And besides, it's smack dab in the middle of the city in Tunjungan. So if you're bored with it, you can go out and have a look around, see what's going on in the city. It's great weather outside anyways. Great. So see you all next week for, again, this is not going, because of the mix-up, it's not going to be slums and settlements. I'd like to talk a little bit more about housing utilities and housing policies, maybe. I think we'll start with utilities first. Okay. See you all next week and have a great day, everyone. Good afternoon. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, sir.